Welcome to the MSOE YouTube channel. This is for Baja SAE, and this video will be a teardown of a small internal combustion engine. My name is Brody O'Connor. I'm a construction management major here, and the engine we'll be working on is a Briggs and Stratton Vanguard 250 one-cylinder 4-stroke motor. Our first step in tearing down this engine will be to take off this upper cover here. It covers things like the governor, the throttle cable, and usually it's held on by 2 bolts in the front, 2 on the side, and 1 on the back, but 4 have been removed just previously. So we start off by using a 13mm socket. Once the screws are removed, you can take it like this, unplug these wires, and then the cover's off. Our second step will be to take off this exhaust. What you'll need is a 10mm socket and a T40 torque screw. And there are 3 bolts holding on this exhaust. If you can see, there's a 10mm holding it on here and 2 screws holding it on here. Now that this screw is out, you can go ahead, switch your socket over to this torque screw, and take these 2 out. Our next step is to take off this air filter, which is held on by 2 screws and then a couple more screws on the inside. So first, you will pop off this upper lever, and then use a flathead screwdriver to unscrew these 2 screws. This is what the inside will look like when you take it off. And as you can see, there are 2 nuts holding this on. These 2 bolts in here are 10mm. And then to fully pop this off, you just pull this hose out of here, and now your air filter's off. Make sure you don't lose these gaskets because they are very important. So inside your air filter, you will see usually a 2-stage filter. This one lays on the bottom and this one lays on the top like this as they go in. And they sit in here like this. Usually, when you are taking apart your air filter, you can see just about how dirty this is. And most of the time, when you need to do a teardown, you might need to replace it as well. Our next part will be to take the carburetor itself off. So for this, you will need a 2mm socket and a smaller ratchet. And in addition to this, you can take your nuts that you took off of the air filter and put them right back on here so that you don't lose them in the future. So once you've got those nuts on there, you can use your ratchet and unscrew these 2. And then proceed to pull them out like this. And then make sure that you take this cable off as well as the spring to make sure that the spring doesn't break. Set that to the side, and you just pull your carburetor off, and there you have it. So in addition to the carburetor, when you take it off, you'll have a couple parts like this metal bracket, this gasket, and this spacer. This gasket is specifically made to go into the spacer a certain way, so make sure that when you're putting it back on, you put it in a specific way. This is all we're going to do in this video on the carburetor, but we will have a carburetor teardown and cleaning video in the future. The next part in this teardown is to be taking apart the governor. Some things you'll need for this is a 10mm socket, as well as it is helpful to have a swivel in order to get in some of these tighter spots. So if you can see on this side, there's a bolt here holding it onto this spindle. So once you take that off, This first part should come off. And you don't need to loosen it completely, but it does help a little bit. In addition to taking off that screw, there are a couple things you need to undo, like these springs here and here on the back side. As well as make sure it is free of any other parts. And there you go, now it's off. For this next part, we're taking off this plate, the governor. All you'll need to do is take off 2 of these 10mm bolts. Now you have your cover plate off. Alright, next we will be taking off this pull cord and cover. What you'll need for this is an 8mm socket to take off 4 bolts on this cover. Once all these bolts come off, you just take that off. Now we'll be taking this cover off. What you need is a 10mm socket and a T40. So this cover is held on by 4 bolts here and down here and here, as well as 2 bolts on the back. Now we'll switch to the T40 and take out these 2 screws here and here. Once those screws are taken off, this cover pops right off and the whole thing slides off. Now we'll be taking off this heat shield here on the back of the engine, which is just held on by a bolt on the top and a bolt on the side. We will take this off using a 7mm socket. Once these 2 screws are off, you can just pull the cover off like this, and this whole side is exposed. Now we'll be taking off this out cover. What you'll need for this is a 10mm socket as well as a 13mm socket. So these are the internals of this out cover. You can see there's push rods here which are connected to the cams, and when these spin, as you can see, they compress these springs which open and close the valves. Right now we're taking apart the internals here. What you need is an 8mm socket as well as a T40 again. So first we will start by taking out these center bolts. As you can see, now we take this out. This is the push rod itself. And if you see any excessive wear on this bottom part here, it might be time to replace it. So now we'll go ahead and take out the other one. And now you have both of them out. Now we'll be taking off the head. There are 2 bolts on top of it holding it on, 2 on the side, and 1 hidden down in the bottom inside of this. To take these off, you will need a 13mm socket. And now that all these screws are off, this will come off as one unit. Make sure you hold on to this gasket and place it in a clean place so there's no residue or anything on it when you put it back. Now that we're inside of the engine, let's take a look at what makes it work. So as you can see here, there's a piston that moves up and down as the engine spins. Once you get inside of here, if you feel around, there's not one in this engine, but if there's a ridge around the top here or any scoring on the inside, take your engine in to get fixed because that means that it needs maintenance. As you can see, there's some weird things on the sides where the screws would be, are these little holders. Basically, all that these holders are for is to make sure that these screws are lined up correctly. Now we'll be taking off the crankcase cover. It consists of 7 bolts holding it on and uses a 13mm socket. Now with all these screws are undone, we can take off the crankcase. Now that we've got the crankcase open, let's talk about what's inside of it. If you look inside of here, these are the governor bolts and gears. As you can see, as I spin this assembly slowly goes outward, which somehow will turn all of these gears faster and limit the speed of the engine. And this is the rotating assembly. So you can see as I turn this side, the gears turn the piston as well as the cam. And if you can see inside of here, there's oil in here, and the oil just helps keep everything lubricated and running smoothly. Now that we've covered what's inside the crankcase, let's start taking it apart. So, first off, you'll see this big bolt down here. This will just pull off, and you can see this gear and the cam come off in one piece. Now, there are 2 lifters inside of this compartment, and those just slide out as well. And those are actually sitting like this to the cam, and when the cam rotates, it lifts these into place. Now that these gears and cam are taken off, we will start working on the piston that needs to come off before you can get this big thing off. Now, if you look inside of here, there's a little bent piece of metal. You might be thinking, well, what the heck is that? That flips the oil up onto the gears and makes it so that everything can be lubricated. The pistons are held on by 2 8mm bolts, and they are torqued down quite heavily. So be careful when you're taking them off not to smush any fingers. This is the oil flipper right here. Important piece. And now that those screws are out, you can take off this bottom piston holder. And then pop the piston out, just like that. Now we have the piston out, let's talk a little bit about it. So this is the piston itself, and on the piston there are 3 rings. The top one, which is the compression ring, the middle one, which is the secondary ring, and the oiler ring, which consists of 3 different rings. The top wiper, the bottom wiper, and the oiler itself, which is usually waffled. Now, with these rings, they sit top to bottom like this, with the oiler being on the bottom and the compression ring on top. So if the compression ring fails, the secondary can act as a compression ring, and if the oiler fails, the secondary can act as the oiler. Now, the next part, we'll be taking off this bolt here, as well as being able to take off some more of these internals. Now, this bolt here is pretty big, and while you can take it off by hand, it's suggested if you use an impact. And most of the time, since this whole assembly spins, you might need to have something to hold it and pry it down. But if you just pulse the impact a little bit, it should be able to work just fine. Now, as you can see, we have gotten this bolt off, which means that this can come free now. Next part of this is to take off these 2 bolts here, which are 13mm. And that will slide right off like that. Now to take this off, we need to unscrew these 2 here, holding this onto this magnet. Alright, to get this flywheel off, you will need a hammer and a pry bar. And so most of the time they're pretty difficult to get off. So what you want to do is get yourself your pry bar, get it in there all good, and then hammer on this a couple times and the vibrations will shake it loose. And there you have it. Now the flywheel is off. Now that the flywheel is on, we can finally take out the crankshaft. Now, inside of here, where we took out the crankshaft, there's a main seal on this side, and there's a bearing on the inside here. Now that this engine is completely torn down, we are going to take some time and clean it out and then completely rebuild it. Thank you guys for watching. Again, I'm Brody. I'm part of the MSOE Baja team. And keep an eye out for our next videos because we will be doing a clean out of every part of this engine as well as a carburetor clean out. So thank you guys for watching.